So today we are talking about training your gut. Some people might have heard about this, but Patricia is going to be here to talk you through why it's so important and actually how to do it. So hit us first of all, Patricia, what actually is training your gut?
So training the gut consists of actually making use of the carbohydrates that you need to fuel your performance and your training.
Yeah.
So it's fairly common to find gastrointestinal issues among endurance athletes. We know that around 30 to 50% of endurance athletes do suffer from these problems, and that can be diarrhea, vomiting, bloating. So all those kind of things, they can be up from the upper tract or the lower tract.
Yeah, it's very common. It's very common, isn't it? Like you said, in endurance athletes, maybe around kind of people that are doing competitions and CrossFit as well. But we're going to kind of focus on a little bit more on the endurance side. And like you said, we have these issues. We experience these issues, and this is why training your gut is important, isn't it? Because if you just do, these longer periods, and you maybe kind of take something that you haven't done before, and you haven't trained your gut, then you might experience these symptoms.
Exactly.
So what type of things, what effects are we looking for when we're training the gut?
What type of
effects are we looking for? Like, what are we actually trying to improve?
So mainly there are two problems. One of them is how the liquid or the food feels in your stomach. So how upsetting is it for you? That will obviously affect your performance if you're feeling discomfort. And the other thing that to bear in mind is how fast is your gastric emptying.
Yeah.
So how fast you can use those carbohydrates to actually fuel your training and your muscles.
Yeah, perfect. So that gastric emptying obviously then has an impact in terms of the delivery of carbohydrates. So if it's sitting in your stomach and you're running, you're cycling, and or whatever, swimming, then they're not going to be utilized for energy. So ultimately, training your gut is going to help you to improve your performance. So now we know what we're trying to do. Like, okay, there's lots of different methods, isn't there, training your gut? Like, let's just maybe hit with, 2 or 3 of these, most important ones, or the ones that can be easily done, in training. Like, what types of methods can we use?
To start, I would say to try and ingest large volumes of liquid while you are training during your training session. That will be like the easiest one to try.
Yep.
Another one could be just going to a training session immediately after having a meal.
Yeah.
Another one could be to ingest high amount of carbohydrates in your training session, even higher than the amount that you want to use during competition.
Okay, yeah.
And another one could be, for example, simulating the exactly nutrition plan that you will use in competition. So you are ready for it, and you know how you feel when you follow that kind of nutrition.
Yeah, that's a really good point to touch on there. That replication, the replication of a race day thing is super important for everybody that is going to compete, whether it's endurance, whether it's CrossFit, whether it's whatever. Weightlifting, you need to replicate that environment as best as possible, and rather than doing something random, on race day, and that then is going to cause potential issues. So we're talking about kind of this work back in terms of maybe using intra workout or taking stuff in during training. So you said like high volumes of liquid, so we could kind of do both of those, where we could take in like a higher volume of like a carbohydrate powder, so we're getting liquid, and then improving, the kind of carbohydrate intake there. So that's a thing I think is an easier way for people to do straight away. It's less of an issue in terms of like eating and training, but it's also going to impact your performance in that training session. Exactly. If you're well hydrated and you've got more carbohydrate circulating, it's going to help you to train a little bit better, plus also training your gut. So these types of things here that we spoke about in term before about the types of carbohydrates, didn't we? Glucose and fructose kind of mixtures and ratios. So people could use that kind of thing on the bike or on the run or something like that.
Exactly. I mean, if you aim to do longer than 2 hours, as I said before, you should bear in mind that there is a saturation point for your transporters of carbohydrates. Yeah. So we have 2 main transporters. One is glucose dependent, glucose and galactose, that is called the SGLT1. And that one saturates at around 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So if you want the intake to be above 60 grams, you should aim to have glucose and fructose in a 2-to-1 ratio or 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
That will depend on how well you tolerate.
Oh, I don't know if we've lost you there, Patricia. Oh, we come back.
Yeah, now?
Yeah, we're good.
So basically, there are different options for you to train your gut. And it's not only training your stomach, but how fast you use those carbohydrates. So we know that we can train how well we tolerate volumes of food, because there are competitions where you can eat a lot of food in like a very short period of time. And these people train for that. They train, they have a season and an off season. And they will do the same kind of training. They train their gut as if it was a muscle.
Yeah.
So
really important point there. Train the gut as if it was a muscle, because that's going to help you to perform, on competition, on race day, when the stress of competition day and the volume and the intensity is a little bit higher. So we need to be, let's say, prepare the body for that. Just lastly, the one about training immediately after a meal. Now, we're not saying that you should be eating a massive bowl of spaghetti bolognese and then going and sitting on a bike. You may be starting a little bit smaller, correct, in terms of maybe and then training, and then building up potentially kind of the volume again. But you still got to work on the principles of what we focus on in terms of pre-workout nutrition, maybe kind of lowering fiber, maybe lowering overall fats and protein, and then maybe having something like carbohydrates. So you could have rice cakes with a little bit of banana or a bagel or something like this, oats or whatever, fruit-based stuff. Again, like that maybe mixture of kind of starch and fructose might be quite nice. And then training, so building up, not just thinking that it's an actual meal. I think is a really
good. We know there are certain things that will exacerbate gastrointestinal problems, such as fat intake, fiber intake, how concentrated is the carbohydrate solution, maybe the weather, if it's a very hot weather, that will affect as well, and how dehydrated you are. So all those things affect. So if you are prepared and you plan ahead of your competition or of your training session, you will perform better and feel better, and potentially avoid those gastrointestinal problems.
Fantastic. I think that's a really useful strategy, isn't it? To have someone, definitely now's the time, definitely training and doing these sessions away from competition days is when you need to be focusing on still training in certain areas, rather than just thinking like intensity or volume is that's going to help me to improve my performance. These types of things are all going to kind of have that knock-on effect. So when race day comes, your body's better prepared to be able to deal with the stress and perform better. Great stuff. I think it's really, really kind of clear guidelines there. Guys, if you've got any other questions, then make sure to pop them in the comments or reach out to us, and we'll keep doing more of these videos to hopefully help you to perform better. Thanks, Patricia.
Thank you, Liam.